Story from MDLAPLA. Workers stage a coup against the manager. Circa 2005, I switched jobs. The new job came with an awesome perk. 3 months working in Spain, I lived back then in Argentina, all expenses paid, earning my salary plus an extremely generous per diem. For me, it was awesome. It meant that I would get pretty much the salary of a year in 3 months, plus the opportunity to visit Europe and travel for the first time. The caveat was that the project was a nightmare. The consulting company that hired me had won a really big bank project and overpromised. We had to finish the project in a really impossible time frame. That's why I was going there. It was kind of an all-hands-on-deck situation. When I arrived there, working hours were ridiculous. 9 a.m. was the starting time, and we rarely left before 11 p.m., sometimes even being there till 1 or 2 in the morning. I had no problem with that. I was living in a hotel. The only people I knew in the city were in the project as well, so we bonded over the situation. My colleagues were also really supportive. They made a point that I wasn't going to work on weekend and told me that we work our asses off Monday to Thursday, but on Friday afternoon, you're going straight to the airport. You have to take on the opportunity to get to know Europe. We'll get by. The problem, as usual in this situation, was the project manager. We used to call him Sauron. He was a manager that took pride in saying, I started working in this company, I met my wife because of this company, I got married because of this company, I got divorced because of this company, I live because of this company. He was middle management, so, yeah. Since hours were really long, and pretty much everyone was exhausted from the night before, the tech team, minus Sauron, used to stroll down to a cafe down the street at 9:15 a.m. and have a hearty breakfast while we planned the day ahead. Team leaders were included, and it was kind of an impromptu and informal scrum meeting we held. One day, Sauron and I had a meeting with the client in the office. While I was there, client said to Sauron, BTW, I'm going to need this and that for this afternoon. And Sauron said, okay, I'll go down to the bullpen and ask someone for that. Be right back. Just keep on with the meeting and I'll join when I get back. But he never came back. The meeting finished with me and the client, and Sauron never came back. After the client left, 2 hours later, I went down and found that nobody was in the bullpen. Not a single soul. Not Sauron, nor the team. And then I heard screaming from one of the meeting rooms. I opened the door and found the whole team shouting at Sauron, and Sauron shouting back. Sauron was furious because the team was at the cafe. The team was furious because he had no right to be angry about that, since everybody worked an insane amount of overtime with no complaints. And Sauron said, I don't f***ing care. You're hired to start your work at 9 a.m. You have to be here at your desks at that time. That's what we're paying you bums for. One of the team leaders, seeing that this was going nowhere, said okay and ended the meeting. Sauron pretty much disappeared all day having meetings and such. And then, at 7 p.m., we all left. Since Sauron asked us to work the hours they were paying us to work, we finished the shift and left. And we did that the next day, and the next one as well. We did it for a whole week. Sauron missed a couple of milestones and got an earful by the client and his bosses. Sauron realized his screw-up. He became docile and never complained about anything else, not the cafe meetings and not even about the seldom longer than usual lunch. We did work a lot more hours than what he was paying us for, but the environment became more relaxed, and Sauron made a point of trying to be at the bullpen the shortest time possible. TLDR, at a project working an insane amount of overtime, the boss complains about people doing a relaxed cafe breakfast start-of-day meeting, so the whole project stops doing overtime until the boss stops complaining and basically disappears. P.S. I know that Sauron got away with what he wanted. We just wanted him to let us work the way we wanted to. This was a flawless example of malicious compliance. OP's team followed the rules to the letter, stripping away all unpaid overtime. The result? Project delays, managerial humiliation, and total behavioral change. Story from Dark Altar 2000... Leave the floor wet? All right, enjoy your rotten wood. First time posting here because I just remembered this incident. Back in the early 2000s, my mother, 40 degrees Fahrenheit, worked as a cleaner for a couple places and took me, 13 years old, with her to help. One place we worked for was the only real estate place in town. We cleaned up before the people who worked there got in. When I started there, it was small and somewhat dirty. Old, smelly cubicle partitions and faded brown, off-color walls, ingrained dirt in the linoleum. We cleaned, and I literally couldn't tell the difference after we were done, except the mirror in the washroom not having any spots on it and the floor being wet from the fresh mopping. Then the town started becoming a cottage town, and it is decided that they will move to a nicer place. Cottagers might find the griminess a little off-putting. New place had a bit more space, brand new blue cubicle partitions, newly painted walls that still smelled the first day I cleaned in there, and a cheap hardwood panel floor. That floor was a bit of a problem. See, before, when we mopped, we would just leave the water to dry on the linoleum. We could do that because we got there at approximately 6:30 a.m., and they opened at 7:30 a.m. The place was small enough that it was mopped by around 700 hours before we left, and would be mostly dry by the time people arrived. If we did the same thing for this cheap wood floor, my mother was worried we would have water seep into the cracks between the wood panels and rot them. So a new method for mopping was devised. First, I dunk the mop, then wring the mop lightly, mop up, wring the mop again but fully this time, and then mop up as much of the excess water as possible. This new method actually visibly got a lot more water off the floor. By the time we left, some of the earlier mopped areas would look mostly dry. Good solution, Mom. Couple weeks into the new place, my mother gets contacted by the manager, and a new order comes in that we are not to dry the floor. I asked if she explained why we dried it. She had. I found this order a bit baffling at the time, and it only occurred to me today the reason why he ordered this. The manager got in earlier than everyone else at about 7:15 a.m., so I actually saw him a few rare times when we ran late. The old floor would have still been visibly wet in the old place when he got in. The new floor was now dry when he got in. Ipso facto, we must have decided to skip mopping to leave early. Even though I didn't understand at the time that he thought we weren't doing our job, I, of course, found this new order stupid. I thought, he wants the floors wet when he gets in. Fine. Cue malicious compliance. You see, I did the mopping while my mom cleaned the washroom because I was young strapping lad and she was mom, so I did what she said. I now had a standing order from the boss to leave a wet floor, and, by gum, it was going to be sopping. From that day forth, not only did I not dry the floor, I now didn't even wring the mop after dunking it. I dipped it in the water and just let water slop off of the mop as I pulled it directly out of the bucket. There was no way this was going to dry before he got in. Probably not for an hour after he got in either. 2 weeks after I started doing this, lo and behold, the wood paneling is already starting to separate at the seams. Dirt is accumulating between tiles. It proves impossible to remove. I was a bit shocked at the time at how fast that had happened. 4 weeks into the new mopping routine, the floor was rotting. Was my mother psychic, or what? It was apparently Osh very cheap fiberboard with a paper-thin plastic wood grain pattern on it. I would have guessed a laminate wood grain on top of semi-waterproof fiberboard if you'd asked me 4 weeks ago. The floor now had visible divots and lines where the plastic paper sank into the deteriorating wood underneath. This trapped dirt in them as well. How classy. The floor, not even 2 months after they had moved into the new place, was even worse than the old beat-up linoleum one. At this point, I asked my mother if we should start drying the floor. And wouldn't you know it, she had already asked. The answer was no. Leave it wet. Baffling. We cleaned there for another month or so. I barely felt safe walking on the floor as it was a now tripping hazard with warped parts popping up. It was also disintegrating. Splinters of wood would pop off every time I swept. The floor now had the dubious distinction of being the worst floor I had seen in a place that wasn't dilapidated. TL, DR, manager says to leave floor wet after mopping. We do. The floor rots, warps, and disintegrates. OP's malicious compliance was brilliantly executed. She followed the manager's absurd order to the letter, causing the cheap floor to rot and warp rapidly. Her precise, deliberate defiance perfectly exposed the poor decision, making the compliance both clever and impactful. Story from ACFF. CEO didn't understand what my department did, apparently. Update at the bottom. Thanks so much for the upvotes and silver, gold, and platinum. I really didn't think this would take off like this. Some backstory. I was a general troubleshooter for my company. My job involved a lot of traveling to different clients we support. My area of work is Ontario, Canada, where I am based out of, and some of the nearby states in the United States, New York, Massachusetts, Vermont, and Pennsylvania. I did most of my traveling by car since my schedule can change quite quickly, and flying can become very expensive. I had one colleague who is technically my subordinate, but we have a very good working relationship and would often handle calls independently of each other, only checking in by phone once a week and in person once a month, balas when necessary. A little over a year ago, I get an email calling me to the head office in New York City for a meeting with the CEO and the board of directors regarding my job. I check with my colleague, and he got the same email. So we make our travel plans and meet in New York City the following week. We have dinner together the night before our meeting and can't figure out between us what the issue is about. It's rare to get summoned to head office and rarer for things to be so vague. When we go into the meeting the next day, we are informed that the company is dividing our department between the US and Canada, and that there would be a new person to deal with the US clients, and we were to restrict ourselves to Canada. Both my colleague and I were a little shocked at this since neither of us has even heard this was being discussed. I asked who the new person for the US was, and we then learned that it was a new hire that the CEO had taken a special interest in. Trying to be of good spirit, I offered to train the new person. There are many realities of the job that are not in the job description. CEO accepted and then brought in the new hire. In walks a young lady who looks about 23 years old and wears an expression that she knows everything. She sits at the table and immediately makes it very clear that she wants nothing to do with us. CEO, Bob, new hire, Karen, my colleague, Jim. Bob, welcome Karen. We have just informed OP and Jim about the change in structure, and they are willing to give you the support you need to get yourself started. Karen and Bob both look at me. Glad to have you aboard, Karen. I think both Jim and I have a lot of experience to share with you, and we are happy to do so. Perhaps it would be better in a separate meeting so we don't take the board's time. Karen, thank you all. I have a lot of ideas about how I can streamline our department and new policies I can introduce that should save the company a lot of money and expenses. I'm very confused at this point. Karen is speaking as though she is my supervisor, and that is distinctly not what Bob spoke to us about. I can see some of the board members giving strange looks at this as well. Bob, perhaps I misunderstood the new roles here. Would you please clarify? Bob, sure. Karen is the new head of your department, and both you and Jim will answer directly to her. Board member, that isn't what we discussed or approved as a board. We weren't fully convinced of dividing the department, but this is completely against what we discussed. Karen, what did you discuss then? Board member, that your department would be divided between the US and Canada. OP and Jim would remain north of the border, and you would run the US. Karen, that's not what I was told, but I can work with that, as long as these two stay out of my way, indicating me and Jim. Jim and I are both shocked and insulted to be spoken of in this manner. We are both very good at our jobs, and before today have never seen this woman in our lives. Bob, that settles it. OP, effective immediately. You and Jim are to have nothing to do with Karen. Do not interfere with her work at all. You are both to restrict yourselves to working within Canada only. With that, he ended the meeting and left the room with Karen closest behind him. Jim and I sat there stunned for a moment, and some of the board members came up to us to express their shock and sympathies about this. I had enough presence of mind to ask if we would get a written directive of this change and was assured we would. Sure enough, both Jim and I got emails with the new directive from Bob by the end of the day. So, after sending an email to all our US-based clients, advising them of the change and giving them the contact information of Karen, Jim and I made our way back to Toronto and reorganized ourselves for working within Ontario only. This meant much less traveling for us, so it gave us more room to breathe. Within a week, I was getting complaints from our US-based clients that Karen was not answering emails and missing appointments. I forwarded these emails to Karen and copied the entire board, including Bob. Another week later, I get a phone call from Karen who sounds frantic but will not admit she needs help. She makes pleasant conversation and then asks how I would handle a particular type of situation. I tell her I'm really not interested in discussing work as that might be seen as interfering in her work. Later that evening, I get a call from Jim telling me he had the same conversation with Karen and handled it the same way. By the end of that month, I get a call from Bob asking if I will take over the entire department again. I politely tell him no, since I didn't want to interfere with Karen and her role. For the next 3 months, I'm getting emails and phone calls from US clients, asking if they can have me back as their contact. This confirms an idea that had been in my head. Jim and I had actually grown our client base in Ontario since restricting ourselves here. So I had lunch with Jim one day and asked him if he wanted to go into businesses with me as partners, starting our own consulting firm. We couldn't provide everything our current company provided, but we could provide a high degree of professionalism for our specific field, and it seemed we had a ready-made client base. By the end of the lunch, he was on board, and we started the necessary steps to get ourselves set up. As soon as we were clear, we both submitted our resignations with explanations of why. The next time clients contacted us, we told them we no longer worked for the company. When they asked if we still worked in the field, we told them we had established our own firm and what services we offered. A month later, we had 60% of our U.S. clients on board, and since the former company had no Canadian support at all, we had 80% of the Canadian clients. Within 2 months, we had 80% of the U.S. and 90% of the Canadian clients. In the year since that time, our new company has grown enough that we have hired 7 new consultants. Jim and I find ourselves doing more office work than road work, and a lot of client courting. Our old company has had to stop offering the in-person troubleshooting, what our department did, and Bob was fired by the board. No idea what happened to Karen. Updates. Because of interest expressed in the comments, I made a phone call to one of the board members I remained on friendly terms with. Here are some answers to questions. How did Karen get the job? Apparently, Bob had set up a business school scholarship out of his own money, which had put something like 6 or 7 students through business school. Karen was the latest graduate, and Bob wanted to give her a start in the business world. Was Bob sleeping with Karen? No clear answer was given, but Bob's wife divorced him shortly after he was fired from the company. Make of that what you will. What happened to Karen? Apparently, she got a job as middle management in a financial services company. Hopefully, she can still build a life for herself and had learned some important lessons. What happened to Bob? Last heard he was a regional director for a large hotel chain. Hopefully, he also lands on his feet. Everyone deserves a chance to make a life for themselves. Some questioned why the board was there for this meeting. I honestly don't know, and neither did the board member I spoke with. It was one of their regularly scheduled meetings, and Bob added things to the agenda. Some questioned my use of non-competes, saying it's not nice. It's a normal reality in the business world. The oddity is that my old company did not have one. The non-compete I have my employees sign is not overly burdensome. It protects our intellectual property and professional contacts. It does not in any way restrict the employee's ability to work in the field. That said, Jim and I have both agreed that if an employee leaves us on good terms and reasonably asks to be released from the non-compete, we would oblige. Some inquired if we are still hiring. Unfortunately, we are not. We are taking a pause from expansion right now, as Jim's wife is dealing with cancer. I don't want Jim to worry about the office while taking care of his wife, so we have decided to maintain our size, which I can do with minimal input from Jim, until his wife is in remission and he has a chance to rest and return his attention more fully to our company. Jim and I treat each other like family. So this is a natural step for us. Thank you all so much for your interest and the great feedback and discussion in the comments. Edit. Replaced all the initials with names because a number of people commented the initials made it difficult to follow. Story from Technos. 3 plus 3 plus 1.5 equals, all you're getting is a half hour, tops. Years ago, one of my employer's clients decided to set up a new office in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and I got chosen to spend 3 weeks there getting the new space set up. Also chosen for the job was a guy from another division's Chicago office, Dave. I'd never worked with Dave before, but from the start, I didn't like him much. He was never less than 15 minutes late. He lumbered like a zombie, and I caught him dozing off more than a few times during the first week on site. Still, he was the closest thing I had to a friend in Fort Wayne, so I invited him out to the bar on Friday for all the company-funded booze we could drink. I wish, Zrania, I'm going home and passing out until Monday. The commute has been killing me. Wait, what? It seems Dave's boss had been a dick, and instead of paying for a plane ticket, hotel, and rental car like my boss had, he'd instructed Dave to drive. From Chicago, almost 3 hours away. Me, dude, that is like totally no bueno. 6 hours a day just driving? Dave, yeah, it sucks. Me, still, it'll be killer money. That puts you at what, like 70 hours this week? Jeez. Make sure you put in for your gas and tolls quick, though. The last time I had to get reimbursed for expenses, it took him over a month. I could see what little light Dave's eyes held fade. Dave, They're not paying for any of that. Hearing that, I put in a call my boss, who was as puzzled as I was. If he'd worked for our division, he'd be paid for his drive time and expenses at least. And we were both pretty sure it was corporate edict and not something individual divisions could choose not to obey. Unfortunately, neither I nor my boss had any say in the matter, and neither of us was familiar with Illinois or Indiana labor law, so all we could do was advise Dave to save his receipts for the IRS and complain to HR. On Monday, Dave was late again. After an hour, I was worried and called his cell phone. "Dave, I just passed Portage, making pretty good time all things considered. I should be there in about 2 hours." Dave sounded perfectly happy about it, so I figured he'd been required to stop into his office before heading out for some reason. Me: "Okay, Dave, I'll see you then." When Dave arrived a little after 11, the first thing he did was take a 15-minute break. Long drive, I understood. There was still most of the day ahead of us, and after the break, Dave finally got down to business booting up his computer. He had barely logged in when he stood up and announced he was taking his lunch. Okay. Something was going on, but I hadn't the foggiest idea what. After lunch, Dave finally got around to some work, putting in a good 20 minutes reading email before stopping by to see me. "Dave, I'm going to take my second 15 now, and then I'm heading home." Me: "What?" Dave, grinning like a nut: "Don't worry. I spoke to HR over the weekend. I didn't see Dave on Tuesday. His cell phone was going unanswered, and neither my boss nor I had any luck finding out why. We didn't try hard. Not our zoo and not our monkey, after all. Ditto for Wednesday, but whatever. He's probably just sick. And then on Thursday, I see Dave, before work, at the hotel breakfast buffets." Me: "Dave, I was getting worried when you were no-show the last 2 days." Dave laughed a little, and after we'd piled our plates with bad scrambled eggs and burned sausage, told me a story. On Monday, the client had noticed him coming in late, doing no work, and leaving early, and called our company to complain. Dave, in turn, was called into a disciplinary meeting with his boss and local HR, who were prepared to terminate him over putting in for 32 hours of unearned overtime the previous week and not working at all the day before. Dave said they were serious, too. One of the guys from building security interrupted the meeting to deliver a box containing the personal effects from his desk. Dave had an ace, though. Well, 3 aces. An email from his boss instructing him to drive to Fort Wayne every day at his own expense as a change in work location. 1. An email from corporate HR telling him that while he wasn't required to work overtime, he was required to report any overtime worked, including driving to or from a client. 2. And a page from his division's employee manual. 3. Which covered paid breaks off-site. He then informed them that he was not working any more overtime, and after 3 hours driving in, 1.5 hours of breaks, and 3 hours home, it left him with just a half an hour a day to do actual work. Less, actually, if the traffic was bad. Oh, and that corporate HR was willing to stand behind him on it. He'd just spoken to them before the meeting. Dave: "It took those about 3 seconds to realize they were screwed, and well, here I am, back in action. And since everything was booked last minute, I'm in a suite with a jacuzzi and my rental is a damn Cadillac." Dave's malicious compliance was flawless, strategic, well-documented, and backed by corporate policy. He turned an exploitative situation into a paid vacation with a suite and a Cadillac. Every move was legal, precise, and satisfying. A masterclass in corporate checkmate.
Story from Suki 5 Buki. HR tries to gaslight me and screw me. They end up bending over backwards. I work for a multinational consulting company. I just recently finished my engineering degree, and since I was already working there as an intern, when they offered me a full-time job, I figured I'd accept it while I looked for another job that I would enjoy more. The project I was in was a complete shit show. The client was always angry at us because we were late on our deliveries constantly. The PL was a good guy but didn't have a clue about what us pawns were doing on a daily basis and would chew everyone out whenever things didn't go as he planned, and the project itself was boring as hell, so there wasn't really any challenge or opportunity for learning anything valuable. To top it off, while most of my coworkers were cool guys, some of them were just slackers that tried to do the absolute minimum, and oftentimes not even that, which usually meant more work for me. There was a huge amount of turnover too, so high that I was one of the vets, despite having been there for only 6 months, so the project never really felt to be getting any traction. To be fair though, they always treated me well and with respect, so nothing to complain on a personal level. After 2 months with my new contract in that sucky project, I finally found a job at another company that I really liked. Salary and other benefits were far better than what I had at the moment, and the project was much more interesting. I passed all the interviews with flying colors, and they offered me the job starting the following month. Great. In my country, you usually need to give a 15-day notice before leaving your current job, or you risk facing penalties. Now, it was my first time switching jobs, so I called HR to confirm this, and they did. It's also relevant that once you put in your leave notice, the company can actually let you go whenever they want before the 15 days are over. This meant that if I would have told them right then that I was leaving next month, they easily could have let me go the next day, and I would have been left without a job for the entire month. With all this information, I decided to wait a couple of weeks before putting in my leave notice, about 17 days before the starting date at my new job, so I could at least guarantee myself half a month's salary. The day comes in, and I talk to HR to put in my notice. They are very polite, trying to convince me to stay, but give up when I tell them what my new conditions will be. Then the conversation goes as follows. HR, all right then, we'll process your leave request. Your last day being 1st October, you will be deducted 6 days of salary. Me, wait, what? Why? HR, oh, you need to give us notice 15 labor days before leaving. It's company policy. Me, but I literally talked to you a couple weeks ago and you never specified that they had to be labor days. We always talked about natural days. HR, I doubt that. It's always been labor days, not natural days. This exchange goes on for a bit, and I start having the feeling that he is gaslighting me. So I try to think of another solution. Me, I still have 6 vacation days left over. Can I just take those rights after I leave? No, sorry, can't do. Company policy. So here I am thinking these duplicitous, gaslighting, unhelpful Tobies at HR have got me by the balls. The only thing he does is remind me that company policy is set in stone. Finally, I tell them that I would look into my options and call back. I start going through my contract to see if I could do anything about this, and I gotta say, I struck gold. The contract I signed was a regular, indefinite time contract. However, the first 3 months of it were probatorial, which meant that the company could terminate it at any time without repercussions for any reason. I looked it up on Google, and I confirmed my suspicions. The same was true for the employee. It had been only 2 months since I signed, so I could leave whenever I wanted. No notice needed at all. With the biggest eating grin I could muster, I call HR back. Me. Hey, it's me, Sucky 5 Bucky. Calling you back about my leave notice. I just read my contract, and since I'm still on probatory period, I take it I can leave whenever I want, no penalties whatsoever. Like for instance, right now at 12:39 in the afternoon. Is that correct? Silence for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds. I guess we can probably arrange it for you to leave right before 1st October if you wish. No shit. Edit. 12:39 in the afternoon, not morning. This was malicious compliance at its sharpest. Precise, lawful, and timed like a punchline. Hard, perfectly executed. This is what such creepy HRs deserve.
Story from 3P Wood Guy taking on my bullying boss. So last year, I'd been working for big UK telco as a senior technical reporter for 16 years. All was well. I was highly qualified. My job dealt with local government, so I had clearance, etc. I enjoyed it, and my company had supported me when I had to take 3 months off 2 years ago with a serious health condition. But then I got a new boss. We'll call her Helen. Helen was actually part of our wider team, a fellow reporter who was promoted. Actually, she was best friends with the senior manager, so the power went straight to her head, and she started reprimanding people for random things, like disrespect for questioning a process change which would double the time it took to do it, etc. She wanted to make her stamp on the job, despite it all working fine until then. Unable to deal with Helen, my colleague Jim hands his notice in. Jim is a technical architect, a role I did some years ago before taking a sideways move into reporting. His customer is huge, and it takes him forever to do his job, especially with all Helen's improvements. Before he leaves, I get called into an informal chat, which turned out to Helen informing me they're not backfilling Jim. They're making a cost saving, for which she will get a bonus. Instead, my role was to be, ta-da, a technical reporting architect for both customers. But that's 2 jobs, I point out. Which part of each are you proposing I drop to even make this remotely possible? We're not dropping anything. It's perfectly doable. But, despite whether you think is, I don't agree. I see Jim struggle every day. It's why he's leaving. I don't want to do 2 jobs. I have my health to think about. Oh, please, you're not so special. She is literally scoffing at me now. I must point out here that my serious health condition was PTSD and a nervous breakdown after having a baby, watching my dad have a stroke, my mom being in a coma following a massive heart attack, and a friend committing suicide. She then goes on to say she doesn't believe in mental health and I should prepare to have my handover from Jim. So I ask her to check with HR whether what she's doing is legal, as it's a change of role with no new contract. This really pisses her off. The meeting ends. A week later, she hauls me into a stress review meeting which, when I arrived, was a reprimand. In order to try and be as maliciously compliant as she could, she'd written down all 11 things I'm supposed to have done wrong. The idea being I'd end up being written up and, should I betray her again, fired. Some of my crimes were being miserable. Yes, I got in trouble for being sad. Refusing to take on Jim's role and being awkward due to my so-called health problems. She faked a customer complaint. Turns out I wasn't the only one she did this to. Not attending a meeting she ran weekly. I went back through my mail to find the email she'd sent me saying my attendance wasn't required as I used a different system due to my customer. She said I was skating on thin ice, and if I wasn't willing to pick up the extra work, then why come back at all after Christmas? This was late December. Okay then. Day after New Year's Day, I called in sick. She was right. I had no intention whatsoever of doing 2 jobs. I had 16 lovely weeks off with my family at full pay whilst I prepared all my evidence. Easy enough since she was stupid enough to mail it to me to take the company to court for bullying. Her manager and best friend would not reprimand her. It never got to court. The entire department was made redundant due to mismanagement, and on top of my redundancy package, I was paid for the remainder of the year plus all my holidays. I got a better paid job the day after I handed my laptop in. My new boss is absolutely lovely, and my new company treats me with respect, and I can see boats and ducks from my office window. She did not lose her job. Her friend promoted her to another department where she's universally hated and back to her old tricks, even going so far as to ring ex-employees' new managers to tell them they made a mistake hiring them, literally just to be a mean bitch. But hey, karma will get her in the end. Edited to add, all my colleagues were quite happy to be made redundant as they were on the verge of quitting, and all have secured better, friendlier jobs. This malicious compliance was masterful, calm, calculated, and poetic. OP followed her push to the letter, then used her own emails as evidence. 4 months paid leave, a solid payout, and a better job? OP walked out a winner. Story from Rickendra. Don't trust me enough to not micromanage me? Enjoy staying late to do my job. TLDR at the bottom. This happened at work about 10 years ago. The context. At the time of this incident, I had been working for a big box superstore for about 12 years, 5 of which as a department manager. I managed 3 areas: fresh meat, frozen seafood, and prepackaged deli and breakfast meats. I supervised 2 part-timers and 2 full-timers. I reported to 3 supervisors, ranking in order: an assistant manager, a co-manager, and then the store manager. The situation? On a particular Thursday morning, it was just I and one of my full-timers, Carl. Carl was on duty until 3 p.m., myself until 4 p.m., and no one else after. My other full-timer was on his day off. One part-timer was not available Thursat, and the other was on vacation. Coverage was thin, at best, and would continue to be that way through the weekend. Having been super light on coverage all week due to one of my guys being on vacay, the deli wall was looking a little thin. On this Thursday morning, I had to decide how best to prepare for the weekend. I knew that I would not have enough staff to commit a person to filling the deli wall on Friday or Saturday. As soon as I had finished breaking down Thursday morning's delivery with Carl, I began busting my ass to get the deli wall as full as possible before I left that day. That way, I could have my guys focus on the fresh meat wall throughout the weekend, where I knew it would be super busy. While I did this, I entrusted Carl to fill the fresh meat wall for Thursday night's 4 p.m. rush. He was a very hard worker despite his age and health. I knew he could handle it on his own. Around 11 a.m., Carl had to take his lunch break. While he is gone, my co-manager, Scott, arrives to work and sees only me, and I'm filling the deli wall while only half of the fresh meat wall had been stocked thus far. Scott does not like this. He tells my assistant manager, Brenda, to have me swap to the fresh wall as it is more important for that night's customers. I immediately seek out Scott to tell him why this is a bad idea and why I am filling deli meats and not fresh meats. But Scott doesn't care. He doesn't want to hear what I have to say. I am to do exactly as I am told. He does not want me to fill the deli wall, only the fresh wall. Did I mention that Scott is ex-military and still acts like he is enlisted? Cue the malicious compliance. I did exactly as Scott told me. After having only worked about an hour on the deli wall, I put all the freight back into the cooler and began filling the fresh wall. Carl returned from lunch, confused to see me. I explained what had happened before taking my own lunch. Upon my return, the fresh wall was nearly finished, but I went ahead and helped Carl continue filling it. Soon we were done, and just topping it off throughout the rest of the afternoon. If someone bought a pack of beef, we both went back into the cooler to bring out another. Same with chicken, pork, anything. Walking back and forth, one package at a time, until Carl left at 3 p.m., and then I left at 4 p.m. As I walked past the deli wall on my way out, it already was looking so much worse than it had when I had arrived that morning. The aftermath. When I arrived to work at 7 a.m. on Friday morning, the first thing I did was walk past the deli wall. I was completely caught off guard to see it had been filled. As I'm theorizing who could have possibly filled it, Brenda comes by and sees the puzzled look on my face. She comes over to me with a bit of a grin on her face. The following is what she had told me had happened after I left the night before. The little bit that had been on the deli wall when I had left only continued to be shopped. More and more of the wall emptied out as people shopped. It began to look like people had been panic buying. It had gotten so empty. Around 8 p.m., a market manager came in to do his own shopping. I did not explain this before, but a market manager is who my store manager reports to. In other words, someone who has even greater authority than anyone in the store. Market manager Bob goes to buy some lunch meat. Lo and behold, there is almost nothing on the shelf. He notices the entire wall is nearly bare. He is furious. Bob demands that Scott come over to the deli wall immediately. Scott runs over and gets his ass chewed. Bob orders Scott to get the wall stocked immediately. Scott only now understands the scope of his blunder. The wall is so empty that it will take a few hours to fill. And it is in this moment Scott realizes how hard he had f***ed up because he hadn't checked the schedule earlier and is now discovering that there is no one in the meat departments that evening. There is no one he can delegate this task to. Guess who ended up having to fill the deli wall? That's right, Scott had no choice but to do it. He didn't get done until midnight. Remember, he had arrived just before 11 a.m. that day, and he had to be back at 8 a.m. Friday. Also, Scott is salaried, so he got no overtime for the extra hours worked. Scott never did apologize to me for not trusting my judgment and for not listening to me, but he learned his lesson. From that day forward, he did not try to micromanage me and let me run my departments unimpeded. TLDR. Boss won't listen to me when he tells me I should be doing a different task that I've assigned to someone else so I can get other tasks done. I comply doing the easier workload. When my boss's boss comes in after I've left for the day to see my initial task incomplete, he chews out my boss and makes him stay until midnight to finish it. About 10 years ago, I was managing 3 meat departments at a big box store with limited staff. To prep for a busy weekend, I focused on stocking the deli wall while my full-timer Carl handled fresh meat. My ex-military co-manager Scott didn't trust my judgment and ordered me to switch to fresh meat, ignoring my explanation. I complied, leaving the deli wall half full. That night, the regional market manager came in, saw the empty deli section, and tore into Scott, forcing him to stock it himself, alone, until midnight. He'd worked a 13-hour day with no overtime. After that, Scott never micromanaged me again and let me handle my departments the way I knew worked best. This malicious compliance was flawless, silent, strategic, and humiliating for the micromanaging boss. OP followed orders to the letter, let his ignorance unfold naturally, and the consequences hit exactly where they should. Story from Sheet Mask Wine Baking. Shut down my bakery, you say? Sure. Sequel to Exactly 1 pound, you say? Sure. Hello, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. A month or so ago, I posted about a little MC I did, and everyone really enjoyed the whole thing. I wasn't expecting to have a follow-up, but a lot happened in the past month that culminated in another little MC with a side of petty revenge from me, so I figured I'd give you all an update. Apologies if this is a little long. Firstly, a little recap. I'm a law student, graduating in less than a week, actually. I run a part-time bakery from my home kitchen because it helps me distress in between the work, and I donate all proceeds to my charity, so it's also a way of raising funds. Mine is the only bakery in my entire locality, so it became super popular amongst the families in my area super fast, and everyone especially loves my tart cakes. Last month, this one lady demanded 1 pound of this tart cake for the 1 pound price. No more, no less. So I gave her exactly that, and she was not happy and vowed she would never buy from me again and make sure to tell everyone she knew not to either. For the sake of convenience, I will refer to her as EW going forward. Just a few days after this incident, I got infected with you-know-what. Thankfully, it wasn't a severe case, but my pre-existing health conditions did not help, and, at least for a week in there, I couldn't even sit up in bed. It just wrecks your body completely. I am still barely recovering. During that week, on one of the days when I had just a teensy bit more energy, I made one post on my Instagram blog about these breads that I baked before I tested positive, and my caption explicitly mentioned that I tested positive, that this was made before I went into quarantine. EW saw that post on Instagram, and I guess she didn't bother reading my caption. She repeatedly called me that day, constantly disturbing me in my rest till I gave in and picked up her call. Completely casual, no acknowledgement of our previous disagreement and her staunch vow to never support my business. She just went straight into it. "Hello, yeah, I saw your photo of those breads on Instagram, and they look really nice. I want a basket of it tomorrow morning." I told her that I am sick and quarantined, but also I thought she was never going to buy from me again. She just laughed and said, No, those are just things one says. Please make those breads and send them over by tomorrow morning." So I told her again that I am sick with a highly contagious and deadly virus. I am not taking any orders right now. I heard her rant about today's generation as I hung up on her. She called me thrice over the period of my quarantine, each time for a different dish, and each time the conversation went the same. Apparently she was okay with me making them because she has antibodies, but I am sick? And incapable of getting out of bed? Let alone bake? Like I also mentioned, I am graduating. I have a lot of assignments and exams ongoing, and they sort of piled up because I couldn't do anything for almost 3 weeks. On top of that, I am also recovering, and it's not been easy. So I sent out a broadcast message saying I won't be taking any orders for May. Any baking I've done the last few days has been just stress busters and easy stuff that does not require a lot of effort. On Sunday, I made a baked eggless cheesecake, something I've had on my to-do list for the longest time. Pick on my profile if you're interested, and made a very excited post about it on my blog because it came out perfectly. The post was barely up, and EW called me. Sigh. I respond because it's just too much of a hassle to ignore her at this point. Child Hua, I saw this mango cake type thing just now on Instagram. Can you make 1 pound? Yeah, she's still hung up on the 1 pound of that, and 4 loaves of freshly baked bread for tomorrow. I want them by 8 a.m., just in time for breakfast. And I'm just gobsmacked because firstly, I don't take orders on such short notice. I need at least 48 hours so I can plan and prepare accordingly. Secondly, 4 loaves of bread by 8 in the morning means I would have to make them all night long, which I am definitely not doing. This is a part-time home bakery, not a bread factory. Third, she knows I'm not taking orders right now. So I told her all of this, and boy, she was pissed. She started ranting about how unprofessional I am, how she's tried so many times to place orders with me, but I'm highly irresponsible and losing out on so many orders, and then ended it all with, "If you don't know how to run a bakery, then close it and go back to doing whatever you were doing before." Here's the thing, I will officially be a lawyer in July. I knew when I started, this wasn't a long-term thing. After I graduate, I will barely have time to bake. Forget baking professionally. I was initially planning on doing this while I was still unemployed, but I figured I can dedicate a month or so to just the job hunt. So I sent out another broadcast message stating that XYZ Bakery will officially be closing after June, and I will no longer be taking orders due to some recent negative feedback. One of my regular clients called me and wanted to express how sorry she was to hear, wanted the whole story. So I told her everything EW told me that day about being unprofessional and that I should shut down my bakery. My culture likes to infantilize my generation, and I played my part of the sweet young kid who was scolded by an older woman and had obviously taken the scolding to heart, because kids should always respect their elders. What I didn't know was that my regular and EW are Siles. They're both married to 2 brothers and live next door to each other. My regular complained to their MIL about EW's behavior, and Miel berated her heavily for behaving so rudely with a child. I'm 23, but as long as it works for me, and she should have more maturity as the adult. So today I got a call from EW with what is the typical adult way of apologizing. "Child, why are you taking my words to heart? These are just things one says. I was only trying to help you be more professional and prepare you for the outside world. Don't close your bakery." I replied to her in a really innocent tone. "No, Auntie, you were absolutely right. I shouldn't be baking. I should go back to law and focus on finding a job. I will do that. I won't take any more orders after June." My mom's friend, who basically runs the gossip channel of the neighborhood, told Mom that EW is being blamed by all the ladies for shutting down the only bakery in our area, and she is no longer invited to their weekly Zoom Tambola evenings. Literally translated from my language. Basically, a phrase that is used regularly over here means that some things are just meant to be said and not taken seriously. Just a way for the older generation to refer to the younger generation, kind of like housen is used in the West. The word is actually the same word for son in our language, but is used neutrally more. Edit. A lot of people have been asking for my Instagram handle. I would share it, but I'm not sure if it's permitted on this sub, so I've added it on my profile. OP's malicious compliance was flawlessly executed, quiet, strategic, and laced with irony. By respecting her elders' advice, she closed shop with dignity, letting EW take full blame. No yelling, no drama, just a sweet, silent takedown that ruined EW's social standing. Story from Alexand23. My 17F manager had me leave the new girl waiting tables on her own, so I took her at her word. I, 17F, am a waitress/server/ cashier at a semi-local Italian chain. Not gonna say which, but it's considered a specialty of the DMV area. I recently had to take a month off of work for health reasons, since I was in the emergency room and then had to spend time in inpatient. While I was away, there were huge changes at my job, including new managers and 2 new employees. I've only been working there since last June, but I picked things up pretty quickly, barring the first day I had to deal with a packed dining room by myself while still in training. I'd messed up pretty badly with the computer system and needed the manager's help. Still, it happens. Yesterday, I met the new girl for the first time. It was her 3rd day still in training. She's my age and a complete sweetheart, and as the dining room slowly became more and more packed, we made a great team. She got to practice working with the computers and talking to customers while I took down the orders and showed her how everything worked. It was her first time properly serving there, and she really did great considering that, certainly at first. The other 2 people who were working was a manager and 1 other hourly employee. The managers at my job will also serve and work the counters. Basically, all waitresses have to do double the work, and we still get paid dirt. But that's another story. I was running between the dining room and the counters to try to keep up, although we can only serve max 2 people at the counters picking up or placing orders at a time. It was to the point where my manager and her friend had bundled up and complained about how cold it was while I was flushed, with my coat off, covered in sweat. Cleaned myself up when dealing with the food, of course. The manager and her friend were sitting down together, alternating between scrolling on their phones and talking, only getting up to answer the phones when they'd already rung 5 or more times, and having people wait at the counters to be helped for 10 or more minutes. It was massively irritating, but I didn't have the time-energy to confront them. Well, about halfway through my shift, my manager told me that I can't just go in between the dining room and the counter, and if I didn't pick one or the other, she'd withhold my tips for both, since I wasn't fully invested in either. Ouch. She gave me a choice on paper, but in reality made it perfectly clear that I was stuck behind the counter and the new girl, the trainee, was on her own. There was nothing I could really do, so I just stayed at the counter, though that was plenty slammed in and of itself, and I really could have used my 2 coworkers who were screwing around on their phones. I didn't have time to answer phone calls, pack up orders, check people out, and take to-go orders all at once, and I had one particularly angry woman call me a lazy bitch for leaving her on hold for about 2 minutes. That stuck with me. While I was doing all this, the new girl was stuck with a packed dining room and no help. About 20 minutes into it, my manager approaches me looking both angry and sheepish. Basically, the trainee had messed up and charged the wrong orders to the wrong cards and needed help. Though the way she phrased this was, you don't have to stay by the counter the whole time. That's not what I meant. I looked over and could see her friend on her phone still, and the manager herself still had AirPods on and a show playing on her own phone screen. I responded in my sweetest, most respectful voice. "I'm sorry, but as we only get paid $10 an hour, my tips are too vital for me to forfeit them, so I'm going to stay put." Context: minimum wage is $15.65 where I live. She was floored, and instead of helping either of us herself, waddled back to her seat and resumed her show. Of course, I ended up checking in with the trainee and asked if she needed my help, and if the mistake was sorted out. She said that she had things back under control and a lot of the people dining in were headed out, which was great because the counter was still slammed. The kicker? This morning apparently a customer called in and complained that the blonde girl, me, and the girl with braids, trainee, were so busy that they were sweating, while the two other women, manager and her buddy, were sitting on their phones. I only wish I saw her face when she heard about the complaint. TL, DR manager, told me to leave the new girl floundering because she and her buddy were busy on their phones, so I took her seriously and literally, even when she tried to take back what I said because there was a big mistake. Update number 1. I really wasn't expecting this to blow up, wow. It breaks my heart that a lot of people can relate. I'm having a hard time keeping up with comments, but I'm reading through as many as I can. I'll update after my shift tonight. For clarity, I'm 17, my manager is middle-aged. I have other applications out, but have yet to hear back, and am definitely planning on reporting to the state. I guess they cut corners here after all, IYKYK. I'd also like to say, yes, I am really 17. English isn't my first language, and I was raised largely by my Ukrainian grandmother, so if my vocabulary, almost said vernacular just to mess with people, is a little dated or odd, apologies. Update number 2. I've been looking into ways to try and get things sorted out. I'm still trying to figure out the best way to report it, as I've been applying for other jobs but haven't heard back, and I can't afford to be fired in retaliation. As I've mentioned in some of my responses to comments, I'm a self-supporting 17-year-old who has bills due regardless and is trying really hard to not drop out of school, so close to graduation. I've been put in touch with social programs and assistants, but they all take a really long time to hear back from. Some folks suggested starting a GoFundMe so I could afford to quit my job and still survive in the interim, but I'm not really comfortable doing that as I don't feel I'm a charity case, yet, to that degree. I do have a Venom, if anyone's feeling particularly giving, though I'm not expecting anything, obviously, at h.and-pic23. I'll keep this post updated. Update number 3. Nothing much new to report, as there's no way to do a state audit without the name of the employee, me, being revealed. We'll keep this updated. This was textbook malicious compliance, calm, calculated, and devastatingly effective. OP followed the manager's orders exactly, exposed her laziness without breaking a single rule, and even got customer validation. Absolutely brilliant. Story from Plogan56. Give up on my career or move out? Okay, this happened recently, and right now things have calmed down, so it feels right to post this here. So about 2 weeks ago, my best friend, 22, had called me, 23, asking if he could be my roommate if I find a place. I was looking for a place to stay while going to college. I told him, sure. But why? But he said he'd tell me later. We both meet up a few days later and drive about an hour away from our hometown to move into the place. We spent a few hours setting everything up and unpacking, yet he never said anything about why he wanted to move in with me so suddenly. After we were done, he sat down and explained the situation at home. He and his parents had been at each other's throats recently because he had landed a remote job after our summer internship, and they thought he was wasting his life playing on the computer. His parents have always done factory and physical labor jobs and look down on people who work from their computers because they don't know what real work is. Side note, his dad actually does his auto shop's taxes and other functions from his office, and rarely does any mechanic work himself, so it's kind of hypocritical. He continues to tell me that the day before he called and asked me, they had a huge blowout that resulted in his parents giving him the ultimatum of get a real job or get out. And he says he just went to his room and started packing. I'm guessing, even if I said no, he was moving out regardless. That brings us to him telling the story to me. When he was done, he looked so relieved. I believe the reason he kept so quiet during the move was because he was holding it in and trying not to go crazy. After that, we both spent the rest of the day hanging out to try and keep his mind off of things. Fast forward 3 days later, his parents call him, asking why his stuff's not in his room. They were gone a few days to give him time to come to his senses, thinking he'd give up his roughly 4 years of college and internships to get a job as a mechanic starting from scratch. There's nothing wrong with mechanic or people who work labor jobs, but he's been working his butt off these last few years only for them to basically tell him to drop all that and get a job they want him to get. I leave the apartment to give him and them some privacy and take a quick walk. When I get back, 20 minutes later, he's got a wide smile on his face, and he tells me the long and short of it. He apparently left a few details out before, and this time told me the whole story. Roughly around the time we started working at that paid internship, his parents have been charging him rent $350 every month as motivation for him to get a real job, and the blowout they had was about him being able to pay it. Despite not having a real job they had picked out, they said he needed to grow up, get real work experience, and even went as far as accuse him of stealing to get the money, so he had had enough and packed up while they were gone. The phone call they had was him basically telling them he can't go back home because he's not going to change his major current job or career path, so he was staying at the apartment with me. I asked him if he's going to be okay. He assured me that he already explained everything to his other relatives and that they're going to try and talk to his family to see if they can convince them to understand why he wants this job and how computer work is still work. This is going to be our last 2 semesters, and the tuition is already paid off, so we're good ATM, as the only thing we got to worry about is the rent, which we can both cover pretty well. Honestly, I was going to ask him to split this apartment with me regardless, because I found a good apartment complex that had a shuttle to our college and had 2 rooms open, but I'm still glad I could help him. He says he'll eventually start talking to his parents again, but I don't think that'll happen until after they come to their senses, or else they might lose their only son. Update: me and my friend, let's call him Jay, got a visit over the weekend from his aunt telling us how they tried explaining to his parents the situation, but it seems like they're deadest on dying on that hill. She says that if he ever wants to move back to our hometown, he can live with her. Jay didn't seem too surprised by the news, and honestly, neither am I. So he's decided to completely move away from home after college to the city. A software company we've been looking at is stationed. It offers remote work, but the apartments there are surprisingly affordable. His aunt says that's okay, then gave me some overly sweet speech about how I'm a good friend for sticking by him, and even joked that we'd make great lovers, which caused an awkward moment. Anyway, I don't know if I'll update soon, as I need to focus on my studies, but I'll try to keep you guys posted. Update 2. Jay had a final spat with his parents, and I was in my room when it happened. I didn't hear everything, but it seems that Jay's aunt exposed what's going on to even the extended family, and his parents weren't invited to some birthday celebrations. I think the family isn't going to invite them to any family get-together anymore. He had them on speaker with them, screaming, "It's your fault for being so stubborn. You should have just gotten a real job like we told you." And Jay firing back, "You're dumbass the one that don't want to listen? I don't care anymore, don't call me." He hung up the phone and blocked them. He explained to me that most of the family staying away from them now because they've been saying and doing stuff like this for a while now, and Jay getting kicked out was the last straw. My mom told me that even the neighbors know about them now. I may have told my gossiping mom about them, and so people just ain't messing with me anymore. This malicious compliance was flawlessly executed. Jay didn't argue or try to justify himself. He simply packed up and left, turning their ultimatum into reality. By succeeding on his own terms, he proved his point better than words ever could. Perfect. Story from Ars-Torok. Be careful what you scream for. I work as a support manager for a company that sells credit card readers and other services for processing money. Our story starts with a phone call that one of our newest staff members received. The caller does not introduce themselves and instead loudly demands to speak to no less than the CEO of the company and will not give any information aside from his repeated demands and some indirect swearing. Normally, this would earn them a terminated call, but I want to know who has the balls to scream at my staff, so I have him transferred over. Having had some of these calls before, I introduce myself with a very fancy title and ensure the caller that whatever his support needs are, I can handle them without any issue. The CEO is busy at the moment, and I am next in line in the support organization. This is not entirely true, but it works to calm people down and get them to tell me what is actually wrong. The caller is named Steve. Not just any Steve, mind you, but Steve, the owner of Steve's Cafe. And not just one Steve's Cafe, mind you, but the owner of all 7 Steve's cafes. Steve is offended that he was given to me and not the CEO like he demanded. He is the owner, you see, and needs to talk to my owner, not me. I don't own 7 cafes, and I certainly don't own my company. So I can't understand Steve's needs and can't make the hard choices he needs made. I again assure him that I do have the position and authority to do anything he requires. I am the manager of the support department. I can make any changes he requires. I can set up new accounts or order new devices. Anything. He only needs to tell me his problems, and I will provide solutions. I will support him. The words are immediate and aggressive. Can you cancel my accounts? Well, yes, I can. I inform him that we need a written request to cancel. I also try to inquire why he needs to cancel his accounts. This is standard procedure. If he wants to close his account, then we close his account, but any feedback is useful. Is he leaving because our product was bad? Because our service was bad? Because he found a better deal? But before I can get more than a few words out, he shouts again, "Have call me! He has my number!" And he disconnects. I report this up the chain. No email means no cancellation, but still bosses need to know. First thing next morning, I get invited to an emergency meeting by the CEO, as well as a few other pertinent admins. We go over what happened, and then I am shown an email. Steve managed to find the CEO's internal email address and sent him an email complaining about one of his 7 stores having a horrible time with the product. He is demanding no less than the cancellation of all his accounts and a refund for 3 months of payments he has made for each, as the product is totally unusable. I check the logs. The problem location does indeed have a problem. That started yesterday morning. They are not down, but they are having a bad time. There are no emails or calls informing us, just the screaming cancellation request. I send over the call logs, and we listen to Steve scream and curse at the support agent before he got sent to me. And then I hear 2 words that cue the malicious compliance. Cancel them. The meeting goes quiet. The CEO has spoken. We cancel all 7 accounts and shut down services. They start their day with devices that do not work. The calls come in. Again, the CEO speaks. That account is canceled. Follow procedure. So each manager calls me frantically explaining that nothing is working. The staff apologetically tells them that their account was canceled per their owner's email. We can no longer provide support. Shortly thereafter, the owner calls in, once again screaming to turn them back on. Uncancel them this instant. Get the devices working. He is losing money. I check with the CEO, and after receiving a nod, I say, "Per your request made over the phone yesterday and your email this morning, your accounts have been canceled." Steve just gets madder and says he didn't mean to actually cancel them. He just wanted to let us know what would happen if we didn't fix his issue. He continues to yell. I let the CEO know, and at his request, I transfer Steve to his office phone. I wish there was a satisfying ending to this story, but Steve and our boss talked. Steve was informed that his behavior was unacceptable. Steve admitted that he was expecting expedited service and possibly a discount when he threatened to cancel. He didn't really want to cancel his accounts. He just wanted support to take him seriously and transfer him up the chain so he could get faster, better service. There was no real apology, though both I and the initial support agent were told that Steve would behave himself from now on, and to report if he didn't. Services were resumed, and all 7 locations were opened a bit late. The one location that did have issues yesterday got on the phone with a support agent and were sorted out in a reasonable amount of time. All is right in heaven and earth. But I do hope Steve learned that threatening to cancel your account sometimes leads to you canceling your account, and not to a discount. The malicious compliance was flawlessly executed, strictly following protocol despite the client's threats. It exposed his bluff perfectly, causing maximum disruption without rule-breaking. The firm stood its ground, proving that patience and procedure can outsmart aggression effortlessly and professionally.
Story from Anachron 101. You are doing too much. You are abandoning your coworkers. Longtime enjoyer of this sub, I have finally found a position and company that I actually mostly enjoy. And I thought, why not share the reason that I actually found this almost heaven? The LDR at the bottom. So I am a banker. Not the Gordon Gekko type, but the other kind. The one where every time you try to describe what you do, people give you a blank stare and try to say something polite. I worked in corporate finance at a large German bank. Speaking English and German was absolutely required. Ideally, you would speak another language as well, as we financed a lot of stuff all over the world. I worked in a mid-office function, so right in between the sales guys with the huge paychecks and the back office guys who would drop everything at 5 p.m. no matter how important it was. My job back then was to support the sales guys by basically doing their busy work and taking over a deal as soon as it was signed. After a deal has been signed and paid out, you needed to monitor it for the whole length of its run, collect documents, reports, balance sheets, and watch out for legal requirements as well as take part in international meetings and just generally be available for everything anyone needs while coordinating all the in-house departments. Basically, I was the first guy you reached when you came in from outside and wanted something to do with the financing in question. We were separated into different product groups, and when I started, my boss sent me to a product which was managed pretty damn badly by a woman in her 50s who still worked as she did during the 1990S, and this was the late 2010S, and a younger guy who worked with the dedication of a local public servant, or DMV worker for the Americans. So the product was basically going to and I was supposed to save it. I worked hard for a few months to reorganize everything, having to suffer my older colleague who officially was my senior while actually not knowing and the younger guy who didn't do anything. But I got it sorted. Boss was happy and sends me to another product. Now, product 1 suffered because of the people, but also because older lady was constantly sick. Product 2 suffered because the women in question didn't speak English very well and made mistakes. That was an easy fix. I just set up our in-house systems for them so that they would receive reminders when the contract required it, and those reminders gave them a detailed description in German of what they had to do. Boss was even happier. By this point, I did the major work of 2 products when everyone else on the team had a main product and worked part-time, like 30%, in a secondary product. I did 100% for 2 products, but since everyone worked very slowly, it didn't stress me too much. So, a young colleague decided to leave for another department, and someone had to take his place. I was tired of product 1 anyway and told my boss that I would take product 3 together with product 2, but he would have to have another colleague take over for me in product 1 since this had been streamlined so much already that it wasn't much work. Boss agrees. I am always ready to help out. I think you can see where this is heading. Think naive employee believes working a lot will get him praise. A common theme here. I agree as well. I start on product 3 and pretty soon I am handling 75% of all deals in that area. I have a part-time colleague who is incredibly slow because she trusts no one's work, not even her own, and spends hours checking and rechecking everything. And a younger colleague who is beloved by my boss's boss because he plays football, soccer to the Americans. This is where it starts to go wrong. Younger colleague gets a lot of projects, besides not giving a f*** and not working them properly. And I suddenly realize that I have worked there for years, and no one will give me a project or anything else that would allow me to develop, even though I do the work of 3 people, and I am still working in product 1, as my replacement takes no responsibility and shoves everything troublesome my way. I say as much to my boss, yeah, I know, younger me kinda lost out when the brains were handed out. It didn't help that he never gave me more than 100% on my yearly evaluations, always finding a reason why he couldn't give me more. Mostly it was because it would have been unfair for everyone else, and I wanted to please, so I didn't say anything. While I found out that the young football guy routinely got 125% while doing far less than I did. My boss was completely understanding and nice and said that something will come. Now I am constantly angry and depressed, and it's starting to affect my health. Boss tells me to take it slow and to actually call in sick when I am sick. So yeah, I do exactly that. Cue malicious compliance. I have a young child at this stage and I am tired and angry and depressed and get a lot of colds and other illnesses that looking back I can only assume had something to do with my mental state. So I get sick about a week or 2 every quarter. Add to that the 30 days of vacation time and the fact that I had to lose a lot of overtime, and I suddenly wasn't there 24/7 anymore. And it turns out that my colleagues are not only not able to do their own jobs without me constantly supporting them, they are definitely unable to do my job as well, because I had taken on so much responsibility. It became pretty clear that all the so-called seniors' job I was denied, as someone would have had to leave before I could get it, completely relied on me. No one could get my Excel tables to work. I still don't get why people don't just Google stuff. Excel isn't exactly rocket science. And deadlines were being missed left and right. I kind of hoped that this would cause the bosses to realize how important I was, but instead all the colleagues complained that I was constantly absent, and I actually came back to a very negative place that hated me, and a boss who wrote he abandoned his colleagues in my performance review, even though that sort of thing would get thrown out by any HR in Germany. Cue second malicious compliance. I got really angry and told my boss that instead of blaming me, he should see what I actually did for the team and how it wouldn't even work properly without me. He was polite about it, but basically said, they don't need me, I am just one of the guys there. So I quit, and I am beyond grateful I did. I now have a job in a local bank, 20 minutes from where I live. Instead of 115H, they actually care about their customers and their employees. Everyone tries to work constructively with everyone else. And when we meet for drinks, it's actually nice and has nothing to do with work. Here, no one gives a shit about education or rank. And it's the first time in my life that I don't dread going to work. TLDR, did a great job, got told to slow down because I am not special, slowed down and made people realize they suck, they turned it around and blamed it on me, got told I am not special, I quit and left, then to their own devices. The malicious compliance was flawless, by doing exactly what was asked, slowing down and taking sick leave. OP exposed how completely the team relied on him. It forced everyone's incompetence into the spotlight and made OP's absence louder than his presence.
Story from How Am I Still Alive? 25. Stay in a receptionist's place? Okay. Context: I worked front desk at an optical store for 2 years. I had no experience and knew nothing about eye health when I started. Over time, I learned to do contact lens training, how to work the machine for glaucoma testing, visual field testing, how to adjust glasses, and a little bit about sales. There was a fire and we had to relocate, which brought on a lot of stress to boss lady. We'll call her ma'am. We ended up losing our tech who did the contact lens trainings and visual fields and our lead optician. Being the type of person who doesn't like to see others struggle, I always offered to help whenever I could, especially if the patient was nice. When we reopened, ma'am's husband came to work at the office as manager, which at the time I thought was nice because I'm sure she needed the extra support. We'll call him Sir. He knew nothing about optical, so he was also training while managing. The problems started on opening day with Sir and I. He wanted to play meditation music and forest sounds. Everyone else wanted general pop and regular music. Since I had access to the speaker, I would adjust it for them. He loved the new space. I missed the old space, but never spoke bad about the new one. If the office was busy and a pair of glasses needed to be adjusted, I'd offer or be asked to help, and in front of the patient he'd yell, "Do you know what you're doing?" One time I turned to him and said, "I've been doing it longer than you." I'm sure he didn't like that, LOL. We had a meeting where he had no bad comments about my work, but told me I make him want to leave, LOL. He would report every word and minor mistake I made to ma'am, and she would send me random texts about them outside of work hours. I never got in trouble for anything, but it was annoying AF. Story: on one particular day, I was doing mostly contact lenses trainings, and a patient called about a contact lens being stuck in her eye. These were considered emergencies, so I told her to come in and see the doctor, ma'am. When the patient came in, she looked really uncomfortable and asked how long until she's seen. I offered to take a look until she could see the doctor. When I took her to the back, I tried taking out the lens and couldn't find anything. I told her this, and she looked discouraged. I said to her, "I don't see or feel anything, so you'd be better off waiting for the doctor, and that ain't me." She laughed it off. I told her I'd been doing trainings all day and was hoping to help her and apologized. She said it was okay and sat in the front. Apparently she went into the room and ma'am told her there were no contacts in her eyes. The patient said that the nurse told her there's a lens in her eye and she wanted ma'am to double check. Ma'am was really upset about this because she had to spend extra time explaining to the patient that I was nothing more than a receptionist. When she came out, she made sure to berate me in front of the patient and my coworkers. I just nodded and apologized. Even after work, she pulled me aside to ask what I said to the patient, and I told her every word. Still, she felt the need to tell me that I make her job harder by misinforming patients. She said I should stay at a receptionist level and not help anyone because it causes trouble. I was shocked by how she spoke down to me and still believed that I told the patient I was a nurse and she had something in her eye. All I could muster up was, "Okay, I'm really sorry about that." After that day, I no longer did contact lens trainings, so now appointments are 4 to 5 weeks out instead of 1. I no longer assisted in visual field tests. I put them all on her schedule. Now we don't have any availability for regular appointments until a month and a half later. I stopped offering to help opticians, so if one person was scheduled, all patients will have to wait for that one person for all adjustments, orders, and dispenses. That one had patients up their asses with complaints, LOL. If anyone had a question about anything unrelated to front desk, I couldn't help them. Even when she would ask, I just told her I didn't feel comfortable doing anything outside of reception anymore. I eventually quit and now work somewhere with a much higher pay and benefits. They've lost a total of 5 out of 11 employees in the span of 1 year, and I heard 2 more are quitting before the end of the year. Edit: the tech didn't die, they quit. Edit 2. To the people saying I shouldn't have been doing anything I wasn't certified for, you're right, but that isn't how the business was ran. I think people were hired based on past experiences and aspirations, whether or not they were likely to stay long. The only licensed people in that office were the optometrists. The opticians and previous tech were not licensed or certified in any way. They still did trainings, visual fields, started dilations, etc. They cross-trained as many of us as possible to maintain productivity. The malicious compliance was executed flawlessly, quiet, professional, and devastating. By doing only what was asked, OP exposed how much they relied on her extra efforts. Productivity tanked, patients were frustrated, and they learned the hard way just how valuable OP was. Story from Thunderkirk. Either suck it up or leave is not the way you want to address the person who's practically carrying the office. This will be a long one, TLDR in the bottom. I worked in the service industry, well, to some extent, for about 2 years before the pandemic came. When I say to some extent, what I mean is I wasn't really serving anyone. I worked in a department called back office, or BO for short. This is where goods come and go. Our department has 2 jobs, to check and to input. Therefore, we called them checker and data. The checker's job is to make sure that all orders are eligible. This included quality and quantity. After a checker has confirmed the order, the data will then input the information regarding said order in the system, after which the merchandise is ours and will not be eligible for a return. Therefore, our department was extremely important. The work was stressful and, more often than not, heavily supervised. We used to have 8 people working at full capacity during the normal days and barely managed to get by. There were weeks when we had to work overtime almost every day just to get everything running in order. Because of these overtime hours, we got paid more than other departments, nearly 30 to 40%. Of course, this sparked controversy. Other supervisors argued that we're using our workload to exploit the company. Mine was having none of it. There were audits, sessions, supervision from the higher office, and they found nothing. They even tried to bring in another crew from another store that's closely related. They quit as a whole after 1 month. When we got back in control, we even requested more hours to cover the shit that they had left behind. Eventually, the store stopped trying to change us. Instead, they tried to limit our hours. We used to request 2 or 3 hours on busy days before, but then, even when the store was practically buried under mountains of goods, they only let us do 1, very rarely 2. We tolerated it at first. Normally, we would stay past the requested hours to see things done, not because we loved the job, God no, but because we're responsible workers, and if we didn't finish the work that day, there were chances we'd get consumed by the flow of goods the very next day. But it was usually 30 to 45 minutes of those extra 1 hour top. When the change happened, there are days we had to do 2 hours extra with no pay. Yes, we should have said "f it" to their faces, but my supervisor asked us to stay and he'd try to fix things. He's a super cool dude, and because I liked him very much, I agreed. The others weren't so cheerful, 3 left after a month, so we're down to 5. Our HC then was 3 checkers, 1 data, and the cool dude. Us checkers suffered, yes, but the data was on the verge of collapsing. She would be the first to enter the office, and usually the last to leave. Her shift was 8 hours, but she worked 12 or more every day. More often than not, 2 or 3 of them were unpaid. We tried to share the workload with her, but we couldn't even cover our own most of the days. His objection to the work hours came to no avail. They were aware that we deserved those hours, so they simply ignore his request and response with something general. He's pissed. It was July, and the heat should not have come from the company as well. He requested a full audit, threatening to leave if things didn't change. They basically told him to either suck it up or go home. So he just left. He's the 3rd person they've hired in 3 years to manage that office, so they thought he's just as disposable as the others. What they didn't know was, he's the only reason I and Miss Data stayed. So when we knew what happened, we immediately noticed the HR that will also be leaving. They threatened us with penalties for unlawfully terminating our contracts because we hadn't given them 2 weeks' notice. But we laughed it off and reminded them that being the special department, the BO was given an extra 3 days off each year, which totaled in 15 days. Also, our contract stated specifically that if someone quit, they could choose to either use their remaining days off and leave early or get them converted into payment. They were so surprised when they found out that we all had our days off fully intact. It's almost as if we'd been too busy to use them or something, IDK, so they couldn't do anything about it. We then left the office with everyone's eyes shooting daggers. Of course, everything plunged into chaos. Did I mention that we're the most important department in the whole chain? because we were, and they found it out the very, very hard way. The other two guys managed to last a week before also leaving, citing something like total madness or absolutely out of control. After they left, the store brought in a team of 10, but they couldn't have covered half our work despite being twice in number. Honestly, I didn't care about it that much, but it's not something that flew by. There were days when their store had nothing on the shelves, so people started to go to the other store in town to shop. When they got things back to somewhat normal, it was after 5 months, and the damage had already been done. They closed last month, and the place is now rented to some small business. Not as interesting as some of these stories. I just thought about it when Cool Dude called me last week. We were still friends. I'm out of town, but we kept in touch. Apparently, after the other two guys quit, they called him and tried to get him back to work. But he's a free agent then and said he was going to charge them twice for consulting fees. Not sure if it's a thing. Also, he would only work with us, citing familiarity to the environment. And if not, then he'd do exactly as stated in the contract, which would be sitting around and ordering everyone to do their jobs. Seriously, he's supervisor. He didn't have to do anything. He helped us because we're head to toe in work and he's a cool dude. He asked if they tried to contact me after that. They never did. TLDR. Store didn't want to pay us for our much-deserved extra hours, ignored our request, and told us to take it or leave it when confronted. So we left it. Edit. Firstly, thanks to all your kind strangers for all the awards. Hope you're having a nice day. Apparently, a lot of people are going to concern about the same things, so I'll clarify it a bit. The situation was not permanent. I've worked there for 2 years. This only happened during the last 2 months of my time. Before that, every hour that we worked OT was paid for, no question asked. That's why we tried to hold on to it for so long, hoping everything would be back to the way it was. The original HC for the department was 12, but after Lunar New Year, people would quit and new people would join. This is a common thing, almost customary. Every year we had to say goodbye to some of our coworkers and welcome newcomers. No big deal. What we didn't anticipate was the pandemic. It's after the other people have left, so we're stuck with 8 for quite some time. This led to those extra hours that others claimed us exploiting the store. We weren't always OT, only during summer when the need for beverages and frozen products rose, and even then, it's only 1 or 2 weeks a month. These were also fully paid. During the normal times of the year, we only OT on Tuesday and Thursday. I won't tell you why, but it's a known thing, and was always planned ahead at the end of the last week. So it's only 4 hours per person a week. Hope that clears up some misunderstanding. Edit 2. TLDR. Edit 3. A lot of people is going to ask the same thing over and over again. So here's some more explanation. I'm in C. Overtime unpaid hours are a thing here. Corporations don't say such things out loud, but you'll never have a chance at a promotion if you don't comply. And once again, the store was very generous to us, to me, for the majority of my time there, 2 years. This incident only happened during the last 2 months, which is why we were trying to compromise at first. I figure it's just a cultural misunderstanding. I'm sure in the US or EU things would have been very different. But if you're in my area, there's a high chance you'd think that I'm just being dramatic. Almost everyone in the head office did. To those who think this isn't malicious enough, I have to agree, which is why I was thinking about it before sharing. I think the malicious part is when we're not supposed to quit, but we did anyway. Basically, we're bound to the contracts, which stated clearly that we would have to turn in a 2 weeks' notice, or else we'd face penalties for unlawful termination. A lot of bad things could happen from this, among which was a bad referral to our future employers, and there's absolutely nothing we could do about that. Yes, we could try to explain the situation, but they could refuse to listen and just simply go for more potential applicants. But, as I've explained, our contracts also consist of different terms that could nullify this agreement, which they did not see it coming. For me, it's justified enough, but I'm sorry to those who think it isn't. No, we didn't try to get our wages back. I think everyone was just happy to leave. Cool Dude especially, he was newlywed and could then spend more time with his wife. I think they were trying to have babies, but because of his workload, they agreed to not think about it in a near future. His twins will be 6 months by this July. As for me, I went there to work, so when there's no more work, I just flew back to my hometown, which is in the other half of the country, and never looked back. Then the pandemic got more serious, and I had other more important things to worry about. Looking back, we could have got it if we had pushed the matter, because every hour we worked OT was documented not only by ourselves, but by the audit who approved our requests in the first place, then got rejected by the store managers. I had a conversation with Cool Dude a while ago. He said he considered it, but decided it wasn't worth it, since there were chances he would be shunned by the industry. They gossip like old women. I worked in the back office of a store, handling vital logistics. Our team of 8 was overworked but compensated with paid overtime until new rules cut our hours without pay. Despite heavy stress, we stayed out of loyalty to our supervisor, Cool Dude. When the company told him to suck it up or leave, he quit. I and our overworked data staffer left too, using our unused leave to dodge penalties. Chaos followed. The store couldn't function, customers left, and it eventually shut down. Cool Dude was later asked to return but demanded double pay and our return too. They never contacted me. Looking back, we could have fought for unpaid wages, but walking away felt like victory enough. This was a near-perfect case of malicious compliance, quiet, calculated, and deeply effective. By using unused leave days to legally exit without notice, OPs and workers crippled the store's operations, exposed management's arrogance, and caused long-term damage without breaking a single rule. Story from No Good DM. Hair too long for dress code. A few years ago, I was a department manager for a large conference center. I ran the top-performing department, as determined by guest feedback surveys, by a large margin. Like, no other department out of 1,200 employees was even close. And my dress style was always nice and professional. Dress code didn't say we needed to have on button-up shirts and ties, but I did it anyway because I looked great and professional, and I met with the leaders of large conferences multiple times per day. I dressed to impress. They were my clients, and whatever their problem was, I was going to fix it. My demeanor and professional attire did great things to alleviate their concerns. My bosses got on a dress code kick for some reason. They made me and my small department, 6 people total, starts wearing lamey, colorful, standardized shirts with a logo on front. The rationale was that the clients should be able to identify me as a staff member. I get the logic, but that was what my lanyard and name badge were for. Plus, the bright, colorful dress code shirt was actually detrimental to my work, as I often worked backstage as a tech during band performances. Industry standard color for techs is black, but they wanted me to wear bright yellow. Okay. I tell them my concerns for my shirt's bright colors being a distraction for the audience as I do work backstage. My bosses don't care. They made up a new dress code and want me to follow it. Fine. So I wear the shirt. But then I also wear a nice sweater vest, or just a vest, on top it. Still got my tie on. I like ties. But to make it explicitly clear I'm staff, I get my own hat made, at my own expense too, that shows the company's name on it. Again, my badge and lanyard are always visible. But now I can do my backstage work without being a distraction to the audience that might glimpse my movement as I go about doing scene changes, etc. But then my bosses tell me that the company's logo has to be visible on my shirt, and I therefore can't wear a vest. So then I get the company's logo embroidered on my shirt's sleeve, also at personal expense. Problem solved, right? I'm wearing the shirt they gave me and the company's logo is visible. At this point, my boss is pissed at me and is trying to write me up for any possible infringement of company policies. I know how to read a room, and I immediately start going to the HR director to approve of my new and evolving malicious compliances of this ever-changing dress code policy. My boss says that we can't wear hats. Okay, fine. My hair is visible for all to see, and I quickly become aware of the next thing my bosses are going to tell me to fix. My hair. They're going to cite some vague language in the employee handbook about hair length. So I go to the HR director preemptively and ask for clarification for hair length. After a 10-minute conversation, we both agree that I am perfectly fine with nothing to worry about. My hair is nice, in a bun, and looks good. It's well kept and stylish, and my specific clientele actually really like it because they're mostly hipsters anyway. But my bosses don't see it that way. They say that my hair is too long and needs to be cut. I ask them how long is too long. I am, after all, a rule follower and will obey the rules. One of my bosses, a woman with long hair that is actually against dress code because it's not put up into a bun, says that my hair should be less than shoulder length. My hair was in a man bun. I ask her if that policy extends to women as well. She says no, obviously, that this dress code only applies to men. Apologetically and feigning ignorance, I ask her to show me where it says that in the employee handbook. She shows me the section where it says that if the hair is longer than shoulder length, regardless the gender, it should be kept in a bun. I tell her that my hair is in a bun, as opposed to hers. Oh man, now it's getting real. I just called them out. They're not happy. My other boss, a guy with super short hair, less than a quarter of an inch long, tells me that as a guy, my hair shouldn't touch my shirt's collar. He tells me that a few stray hairs of mine are touching my color. I pull out my phone and take a picture of him. I show him that even his 1/4 inch hair is touching the collar. His head was leaned back and his hair was touching his collar. I ask them again to clarify how long is too long, because his 1/4 inch hair is too long for their standards. Side note, I love my thick hair. Someone telling me to cut it arbitrarily speaks fighting words. Then they tell me that I just need to do what I'm told because it's company policy, and if I don't do it, they'll get HR involved. I tell them I already got HR involved, and the HR director explicitly told me that my hair was perfectly fine. But these two bosses of mine just wouldn't let it go. They had to go after my hair. They told me that since I'm a manager and meet with group leaders, I have to go above and beyond what the dress code says, and I have to act professional in order for us to receive good guest feedback regarding professionalism. I tell them that I and my department are already the most professional and highest-rated department according to guest feedback surveys. I take the printout of the survey results out from my bag because I anticipated my lack of professionalism was going to be questioned and had it printed in advance. And I show them the survey. They read it, toss the paper aside, and tell me to cut my hair or be written up. Fine. The next day, I come into work with a shaved head. They never told me to cut my hair again because I look far worse with no hair. Coincidentally, they also let me wear my hat again, haha, but only because my shaved head was a sore sight. As a point of interest, when I resigned from my position a year later, I submitted to HR my 80-point paper why my two bosses caused me to leave the organization, how they stifled me and my department from doing legitimately good and quality work, and how I felt that under their leadership, I was incapable of ever winning. A month after I left, I heard from a friend and previous coworker who was still at the company that my direct boss was forced to retire, and my other boss was fired. My friend told me that they were privy to a conversation held between the CEO and my female boss, the one who was fired, and my friend overheard the CEO say, "Your time here at this company is over, and I want you to know that when you're gone, your position will not be filled. Consider you and your position eliminated." Lastly, I haven't cut my hair since I left, apart from occasional trims. It's now almost 3 feet long, and I plan on giving my gorgeous lion's mane away to some charity that deals with making wigs for kids. Edit. Since many have asked, I'm uploading a few pictures to show my hair. One of the pics is my general attire, what I typically wear when not wearing the black shirt for performances. One is with my hair curly, photo taken last year though, and the other was taken last October for Halloween when I was a peace-loving hippie. I removed my face so I won't be identified in case a previous coworker sees. The hair. Edit 2. Thanks everyone for your responses and for the awards. I had no idea this story would blow up like it did. Also, I'm sorry for the late replies and late posting of my hair. I have a newborn son, who is dang cute, BTW, and my time is often occupied in taking care of him. So, my apologies for my late responses. This was Malicious Compliance at its absolute finest, clever, calculated, and hilariously effective. OP followed every rule to the letter, exposed the hypocrisy, and delivered a visual consequence so impactful it forced policy reversal. It was more than perfect. Story from MD Alepla. New boss gives angry me an impossible task. I don't know if this is exactly malicious compliance. Kind of a revenge story. I used to work for a big IT consulting company notorious for not paying overtime. I worked for a client's migration project for almost 1.5 years leading the functional migration team. The three of us worked for the client 3 years before the start of the migration project, so we knew the data we had to migrate, all the nuances, and 2 weeks before the migration date, 99% of the data was already migrated and validated. We only did the day-by-day new data and sag off pretty much those 2 last weeks. Other manager, that outranked me, became extremely angry about our calmness because the part she led was behind schedule due to bad scheduling, and everyone was being overworked because of her mishaps. Come migration date, Saturday starting 9 a.m., everyone was expecting long hours of work, but we clocked out at noon with the data validated with the client and the go-ahead signed, sealed, and delivered. My team got a written commendation from the client. The manager's team spent the entire weekend there. She got a complaint letter from the client. The manager complained about us and made me and my senior analyst spend the next month waiting for bugs, complaints. We got 5 in the whole month. My senior analyst spent 8 hours a day studying a new language. I took the chance to update my CV. I wanted out, and pretty much help a couple former colleagues that needed to solve bugs and problems within the manager's team responsibilities. A couple weeks later, evaluation time. At the IT company, everyone was graded A to D, A being exceeding expectations, D being you're out of here, B was good, C was pretty much I'm starting to think you might not be good to work here. Given the commendation from the client, I was expecting an A. My evaluation was done by the manager and my mentor, close friend with the manager. They gave me a C because we didn't see any pressure on your work, and you certainly lack motivation. I complained and took a long overdue, already planned month-long vacation. This was June. After that, back at work, I was assigned to a project on another client led by manager's husband. He wanted me to prepare 122 integrations with different systems in 4 months. I told him that in the previous project, led by his wife, they took 2 years to have 12 integrations ready, but I would give it a shot. I even emailed him the planning, where it clearly showed the time they took. 2 of those months were July and August, months where pretty much everyone on the client goes on holiday. Manager and wife also went on holiday pretty much all August. I spent those 2 months chasing people around the client's office, but starting September, 6 integrations were closed and 6 more were almost closed pending validation. Manager came back from holidays and was furious. He called me a slacker and started telling me that his wife was right, that I lacked motivation, and that I would need to spend the rest of the project duration working till midnight to make up for lost time. And I said, "No, I won't do an hour more than what you're paying. I told you that your expectations were unrealistic, and you went ahead with them anyways." He went ballistic. I replied, "I just lack motivation to work in your project. I want out of the project." I was out of the project in no time. I got a call from my mentor. She said that they were evaluating firing me without pay because of this. I told them about the unrealistic planning. She said that I was being unrealistic and that the planning was good. I produced the email I sent the manager. My mentor went quiet. A minute later, she told me, "What do you want?" "If you can't guarantee I won't do an hour of overtime ever again, I want out, full severance, and then some, and I want the company to make it look like I quit, not that you fired me." She went quiet again. She said she'll see what she could do. I was out of there, smiling, by the end of the day. P.S. From the team that remained in the project, 4 guys were on my team before the migration project. They all complained. They all got out of the project as well. PS2. A fake. The project took twice the expected time to be completed. Manager's husband got nearly fired. Wife held a lot of power and managed to save his ass. TLDR. After f***ing me on a prior project, manager gives me an impossible task. I tell him that it's impossible. He goes ahead with it anyways, complains about my work when reality hits him, and tries to fire me without pay, gives me grounds to get a bigger severance than the usual. OP executed malicious compliance perfectly, followed impossible demands while clearly warning management, refused unpaid overtime, and documented everything. This smart, professional approach exposed the unrealistic expectations and managerial failures, ultimately forcing a generous severance and a clean, victorious exit from a toxic project. Next story from FTS. Not allowed a day off if you ask with less than 2 weeks' notice unless you are sick? Fine, I'm sick. I worked for a grocery store in Australia for close to a decade. It wasn't terrible, and management treated us with respect for my first few years there. If someone couldn't make a shift, they'd work with us to find a replacement. We were rarely short-staffed, so worst-case scenario, things would still run relatively smoothly, even if we were missing a few on a given day. Fast forward a few years, the good manager retires, and an assistant manager from a nearby store is promoted to managing this store. Let's call him Brad, for the sake of this story. Brad approached the position with an ego, treating the store as his to fix, even though things had been running quite smoothly for years before he was in the picture. Part of his vision of fixing the store was stricter adherence to company-wide guidelines in terms of staffing numbers and leave requests. For example, the amount of staff to be rostered on is determined by the number of customers through our doors each day. Staff who was actually experienced at this location knew that we needed more than what the company guidelines specified to be able to function effectively. Within the first month of Brad's tenure at this store, hours are being cut dramatically across the store, causing chaos as nobody was used to the added workload. When confronted about this by other members of management, he immediately dismisses them, quoting company guidelines. During the same period of time, staff began to notice that any request for leave was being instantly denied by Brad. Now, the company guideline is to give at least 2 weeks' notice if you know you'll need a day off. But it goes without saying, sometimes friends or family will make last-minute plans you'd like to attend, or you can't work a shift due to compassionate reasons. Prior to Brad, if you needed some time off, it was as simple as honestly communicating your situation with our manager. Almost always were we able to come up with a solution, and taking a day off was never a big deal. Keep in mind, these guidelines are just that. Guidelines, not strict rules that must be enforced. Store managers are given a rather loose collar from higher management. As long as things are running smoothly and staff are happy, upper management will usually take a rather hands-off approach. They won't micromanage each individual store, ensuring every little corporate guideline is being adhered to, unless there are obvious issues requiring their attention. So now Brad's about a month into his position. We are short-staffed throughout the store. Everyone is stressed, requests for leave are being denied due to the lack of staff that Brad caused in the first place. Brad quotes company policy each and every time he does this. He won't even allow us to organize someone else to cover shifts as it's too much paperwork. It's a Saturday and I'm due to work my regular shift that same night. I get a call from a friend with a spare ticket to see my favorite artist's sold-out show. I want to go, and I've spoken to a colleague who's willing to cover my shift so I'm not screwing over my team. I call the store and I speak to Brad. Tell him the situation and that I have someone to cover said shift. Brad predictably gives me the same response that he's been giving everyone else. Sorry, as per Grocery Store X's staffing policy, you must give 2 weeks' notice for any time off. It doesn't matter if someone else is willing to take the shift. Cue malicious compliance. For a manager who's so into following rules, I was surprised to discover that he never took into account Grocery Store X's sick leave policy. Staff are entitled to paid sick leave for a day without the requirement of a doctor's note. If you take 2 days or more off consecutively, then you need a medical certificate. I call back an hour after my initial call. This time I tell Brad that I've come down with the most terrible headache and that there is no way I can work that night. He doesn't even reply to me. I can faintly hear him angrily mumble that he'll have to call in a last-minute replacement before hanging up. It didn't take long for staff to catch on to this loophole. Staff needing time off with less than 2 weeks' notice would no longer bring it to their manager's attention immediately, instead opting to call in sick the day of each time. Obviously, this ensured further chaos in terms of lack of staff, a problem I never experienced in my near decade at the store. Brad quit after about a month and a half of being manager. Replacing him was the old assistant manager that has been at this location for several years at this point. It took a while to reverse the damage Brad had caused, but things got back to normal with someone who actually knew how to run the store at the helm. TLDR. New boss takes corporate guidelines too literally, causes staffing issues that never existed to begin with, citing said guidelines as justification. Staff en masse uses other corporate guideline as loophole to get around manager, only causing further chaos. Boss quits and things slowly go back to normal. The malicious compliance was flawlessly executed. By following company policy to the letter, staff exposed Brad's inflexible management as the true problem. It forced chaos he couldn't control, ultimately pushing him to quit.
Story from K. Rich Comics, wearing combat boots during nursing school. Back when I was in nursing school, we were supposed to wear black, non-porous, closed footwear with non-skid soles for our clinical rotations that weren't Crocs. Most of my fellow female students wore classic nursing clogs like Dascos and Sanitaz. I tried wearing clogs like this in the past and had rolled my ankles too many times to recall, so I decided to not go that route for shoes. I'm a military spouse, a vet myself, and have aforementioned ankles, so my footwear of choice was a pair of black leather tactical combat boots. As a show of support and to make sure I always looked sharp at clinical, My hubby always shined up and edge-dressed my boots every evening before clinical. The next morning, the boots always looked professional, they were comfy as hell, I could bump my toes into beds without breaking a toe, and I could wear them all day without having back pain, foot pain, or rolling an ankle. The same could not be said for my classmates wearing more traditional shoes like clogs. During the first week of my first semester, I had an old-school nurse as my clinical instructor. I say old school because she believed female nurses should still be wearing crisp white uniforms with the stupid starched hats, and that our profession lost prestige when we transitioned to scrubs. This instructor got such a bee in her bonnet about my boots and decided that my boots were out of regulation that she threatened to take it up to the director and have me tossed from clinical, thus failing the program. There was nothing in the handbook specifically stating I couldn't wear my boots, since it just stated footwear, which was black, well-maintained, non-skid, and non-porous. Check, 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 check. Furthermore, the pair of boots that I wore was meant to be worn by EMTs, so they were waterproof, bloodborne pathogen resistant, puncture-proof, oil-proof, non-skid, and had reinforced toes. They were just as expensive as Dansko clogs and could handle lots more abuse. I knew I was in the clear, and so I decided to keep on wearing them. The day after the instructor commented on the inappropriateness of my boots, she did a uniform/shoe inspection to make sure we were appropriately attired. I, of course, was wearing my nicely polished combat boots. She failed me for the day based on my boots, so I politely objected, stating that my boots fell within the definitions of acceptable footwear in the handbook. She literally marched me to the director's office like I was kid caught stealing cookies and demanded I get tossed for the boots, failure to follow program rules, and disrespect because I objected to her failing me. The program director, upon further close reading of the program rigs, determined there was nothing that was wrong with the boots. They adhered to the standards set forth by the program, and that they were honestly safer than most of the shoes the other students were wearing because they were waterproof, puncture-proof, non-skid, and had reinforced toes. She rescinded my fail and allowed me back in clinical. After that, I heard not a peep about my boots from any of the faculty the rest of my program. Fast forward to graduation. I had been wearing combat boots since I started and had no intention of stopping, especially since many of the vets that I cared for during clinical always reacted positively to them. Our nursing pinning ceremony, the event where we receive our nursing school pins and are officially recognized as nurses, has an all-white dress code. White uniforms, starched white hats, white closed footwear. The word footwear is key. The dress code did not state shoes specifically, and I knew this. Same bitchy old bat nurse sees me in the hall and makes it a point to tell me I'll have to get some real white nursing shoes to wear to pinning, since I can't obviously wear my black combat boots because we needed to have white footwear. I politely smiled, nodded, said that I'd have white footwear, and went on my merry way, and then wore the all-white Doc Marten combat boots my infantryman husband bought me as a graduation gift to pinning. The instructor stopped me after the ceremony and complimented me on actually getting nursing shoes, at which point I pulled up the leg of my white scrubs and showed her my boots. The look on her face was priceless. TLDR, nursing instructor tries to fail me for wearing combat boots, nursing director okays it, I wear black combat boots the whole program. Same instructor tells me to wear white nursing shoes for the pinning ceremony, I wear white combat boots instead. Edit. So this post kind of blew up, and a lot of people are asking what kind of boots I wear. I wear a ATAC 28 Defenders by 5.11. You can get them directly from 5.11 or at Galls. Thank you for all the love. The Malicious Compliance was masterful. Every detail followed the rules to the letter while defying the spirit of an outdated power trip. From regulation black to pristine white combat boots, it was bold, respectful, and deliciously satisfying. That final reveal? Chef's kiss.
Story from First Contribution 236... This happened several years ago and is a multi-year long story. I'll keep it as succinct as possible. We installed cameras in front of our home that were looking at our vehicles. Part of the camera angles did overlook parts of two neighbors' properties, one backyard and one side yard. The cameras were battery operated and had a function where you could gray out areas that you didn't want to film. When motion occurred in the grayed out areas, the cameras would not be activated to film. The neighbor's entire properties and several bushes on our property were grayed out. We did this when installing them. One of the neighbors was a friend and had no issues with this whatsoever. We showed her the camera angle, and she said she didn't care whether or not we grayed out that area. We still left it grayed out over battery life concerns. The other neighbor's name was Karen. Not really, but we all know why I chose that name. Karen was on the HOA board, and, as you can imagine, we didn't get along with Karen or the HOA board. We told Karen about the camera and showed her the grayed out areas at the same time that we told our friendly neighbor about it. It was simply an FYI conversation. We're not on friendly terms, not an asking permission conversation. She told us to take the cameras down immediately, or we would regret it. About a week after we hung the camera up, we got a notice from our HOA that we were violating the bylaws. The bylaw in question? A nuisance to your neighbors bylaw. There wasn't a specific bylaw preventing placement of cameras, so this is all they could find to try to punish us. We responded with a letter detailing how we were not violating any bylaws or laws in general, and asked them to cease and desist. We all know how these stories go, though. They did not cease, and they did not desist. Their first response? The HOA has the right to enforce these bylaws. Try to stop us if you think you can. These types of responses were unfortunately quite common from this board. We entered this battle with one goal in mind: to cost them as much money and time as possible. The HOA hired a lawyer specifically to fight us. To my knowledge, this has not happened to any other residents. In the following 4 months, we ended up costing the HOA over $4,000 in lawyers' fees fighting this battle. For reference, the entire HOA income was approximately $25,000 per year. When it came time for our official HOA hearing over the matter, we had successfully postponed it, thanks to an attorney friend 3 separate times. There were over 100 back-and-forth emails with the HOA attorney and ourselves. Each one of those emails was a 15-minute expense for the HOA, and I was happy to follow up a follow-up question with another follow-up question if it meant the HOA attorney was going to keep billing them. Did I say follow up enough times? We didn't actually want to take this battle to court, so we ended up removing the cameras the day of the hearing to prevent being fined, even if the fine wouldn't hold up in court. The HOA decided in the hearing that we were guilty, surprise, surprise, of violating the bylaw. They couldn't fine us, as the bylaws don't allow a fine until after a hearing has been held, and the cameras were already removed. In the end, the punishment was a sternly written piece of paper on the attorney's letterhead, delivered via certified mail, that stated that we were not allowed to place a camera on our home that had the potential to invade a neighbor's privacy. Keep in mind, the letter specifically stated the camera could not be placed on our home. We left the cameras off of the home for about 4 months, until the annual HOA meeting. You should have seen the look on the HOA board's faces when I asked them to explain the $4,000 line item for attorney's fees that simply stated, "Title searches, attorney fees." The board actually tried to hide the fact that they spent $4,000 trying to fight us over a couple of cameras by putting the fees in as title searches. Needless to say, that meeting did not go well for them. About half of them lost their positions on the board. The other half, including Karen, unfortunately, remained on the board. About a week after the annual meeting, we installed new cameras, facing the same direction as the prior cameras, only this time we installed a post in the ground and mounted the cameras to that post. The admonishment we received after the hearing specifically stated that we were not allowed to install cameras on our home, and said nothing about putting them on a post. They did send a letter to try to tell us to remove the cameras, but a sternly worded response indicating that we were prepared to fight them actually worked this time around. I guess they didn't want to spend another $4,000 fighting us. We didn't receive any follow-up responses, and the cameras on the post are still installed to this day, over 2 years and running strong. Several years ago, I installed battery-powered cameras on my home to monitor our vehicles, carefully graying out neighbors' properties. One neighbor was fine with it, but Karen, a hostile HOA board member, threatened us. The HOA cited a vague nuisance bylaw and hired a lawyer, spending over $4,000 fighting us. With help from an attorney friend, we delayed the hearing repeatedly, draining their budget with endless emails. Just before the hearing, we removed the cameras to avoid fines. The HOA sent a letter forbidding cameras on our home, so months later, we installed them on a post instead. At the annual meeting, I exposed the hidden legal fees, leading to half the board being replaced. The cameras are still up. This was malicious compliance at its finest, precise, patient, and punishing. OP followed the letter of their demands while exposing their incompetence, wasting their resources, and outsmarting their legal scare tactics. The cherry on top? OP's cameras are still standing strong. The HOA board asked me to remove my CCTV cameras. I played a way that led to half the board being replaced. Many corporate employees are fighting in a meeting. In the background, a young corporate employee is laughing